Let's welcome to the show President of the NZEI, Mark Potter. Mark, good evening and welcome to the show.
Tēnā kōrua.
Hey, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate you giving us some time because there's been this announcement by the government today. And whilst we can talk about things like phonics and kind of a layman's understanding of it, it's much better for us to bring on someone with more knowledge to A, explain to us what they're saying, and B, talk to us about maybe what the response is. I know it's only day one, and so you probably only just started to scratch the surface, but as representative of part of the teaching community, we hope you have a bit of a feel for it so you can let us know what they, like when the 2010 national government was in and they brought in national standards, I know NZEI was like, guys, this is not going to go well. And we kind of saw that 14 or 15 years later when the current national government managed to blame the Labour government for the performance of 15-year-olds, which seems to be a follow-on from... Anyway, so yeah, we're keen to have you on board to have a bit of a chat about it. I think what we'll do to start with is we'll actually watch the clip from One News together, and that'll bring everyone up to date who's not up to date, and then we can talk from there on in. So the Golden Fox, Simon Dowler, was talking about student evaluations, and we'll check this out and then come back in 90 seconds, 2 minutes or so.
The majority of students will be evaluated using two familiar types of tests, and a move the Education Minister says will go some way to improving achievement. But as senior political reporter Benedict Collins explains, some say the government's focus should be elsewhere.
Kids at Silverstream School braving the cold.
Just quietly, TVNZ, when people from Dunedin hear about a suburb just north of Auckland City braving the cold and they're dressed like that, you just read the room, guys. Read the room.
And welcoming the Prime Minister.
How are we?
Good morning, Mr. Luxon.
Good morning.
And education was on the cards.
My name is, my sound is.
From 2025, all children in their first year of schooling will participate in two very simple phonics checks. But crucially, this will help teachers to identify those learners who may need a little bit of extra help.
For years 3 to 8, most children will have to have their reading, writing and maths assessed through learning tools called EASTL and progressive achievement tests.
And to have a world-leading education system, we need everyone on board.
90% of schools already are.
There is quite a big uptake already, but what we know from ERO is that it's not consistent across the country.
The tools help show where kids are at.
What's really important is that we don't set tests that kids pass or fail, but we set tests that give us important information about what we need to teach next.
It's part of the government's plan to have 80% of students up to speed on reading, writing and maths before...
Oh, careful, Mr. Luxon. Remember the last time we did this, K is for cat. Just got to say, we're just putting it out there to be careful, sir. Don't get caught out in that. You see, it was a gotcha question by those children last time. K is for cat.
Or high school by 2030. But some aren't convinced.
One of the things that I think is important to note is that in countries which have introduced things like phonics tests or even national testing, there's not been a correlation in improvement in terms of outcomes.
She questions whether it's really where the government's focus should be.
I think that for a lot of schools, they would have preferred to be finding out how they can access more learning support for students or professional development for teachers. Because this announcement is potentially addressing a problem that doesn't really exist.
I'm really concerned that we're forcing schools down one track to say that this is what has to happen, this is what you have to use, and then I'm really concerned about what will happen with that information.
Back at school, the Minister was teaching students how to deal with the press.
The key is don't look at the camera, just be cool.
Unfortunately, it was not achieved.
So there you go. There's the story from One News. Look, no real questions to start with, Mark. Why don't you just give us your feedback to the story we've just seen?
Well, what we're looking at is yet another statement that really is adding nothing to repertoire of what schools need to be able to address the learning of children. Certainly the most important thing that does occur is the conversation between the parent and the teacher about what a child needs.
Right.
And schools, as they point out, 90% of schools are already using these assessment tools. So it begs the question, why do they think this is going to be a significant change to what's happening with achievement in our country?
Yeah. Okay. Well, why do you think then? Like, just to go kind of full picture on the political side of this, we've had, before he passed away, we had Chester Burrows on talking about gang patches, because that was something under his national government that they tried to do. And he said bluntly, it's a great bumper sticker. It's not very good legislation. Is this something that's a good bumper sticker? In other words, it sounds good, the politicians saying it, but really schools are already doing it, and it's just kind of amplifying something that they're already doing for the sake of being able to say, hey, look what we're doing. Do you know what I mean?
I think you're quite correct there, Pat, because we have had, and we've had elements where we talk about soundbite policy divisions and so on. Bumper sticker is a good way that Chester's put that. It sounds great. People think, oh, that sounds firm. But in actual fact, it's not making a significant difference. It's when schools are already assessing children. It's in the assessments that I've talked about there. They are designed already for teachers to look at and analyse to figure out what does a child actually need. There's a lot more work in it than just taking a score and saying, right, this kid should be in the giraffes and that one's in the dolphins sort of thing. It needs careful analysis. Teachers are already doing it. Schools are already doing it. What schools and teachers have been saying very consistently for quite a few years now is the game changer is that we need more support with the learning of children. We need more specialists. We need more people in the classrooms themselves. And we need more time for the teachers to prepare and do all the design for the learning for each child. None of that has been forthcoming. So we keep waiting to hear this great leap forward in these kinds of areas, but it never happens.
I know this has just been released sort of this afternoon. So these ideas, as the government's putting it in there, are fairly new, not new ideas, but new that they've announced it. Have you got a bit of a feedback from teachers or anything yet? Have you heard from any of the people in the classroom on the coalface as to what they think about this?
Well, most of the feedback we've heard so far is, so what? What is this going to change for us? We've heard some say that they've already been making decisions about reducing the amount of assessment required in order to be able to do actual teaching with children. And they're worried that this is just the start of more mandated state-driven decisions that should be made by people in the classrooms, not by politicians.
Right. So we've been talking about, I know we're exaggerating here, but talking about this current government, national government, feeling like it wants to go back to school of the 1950s. Does this have the same kind of vibe about it?
Well, it's very curious that this government's been talking about things such as they've had an advisory group that's talking about taking us back to cursive handwriting.
Yeah.
It's kind of, everything seems so retro because there's this nostalgic idea that we could just behave like we did back in the 50s and 60s and everything would be the same. The world is not the same as it was then. Our families and our children are not living in the same situations, circumstances that people enjoyed back then. And we've actually been making some good inroads into some of the parts of our community that honestly the 50s and 60s weren't kind to. And a lot of these measures look like they're going to roll back some of those improvements. And hey, that's not going to be productive for anybody.
Yeah, I've got several more questions, but Chewy, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'd be interested to see if you agree with me here. It really seems that they've made an announcement that says that they're rolling out something to 10% of schools that aren't already doing it. And it definitely seems like they are harkening back to the standardized tests and standardized achievement gateways that people might look back fondly on their own schooling, perhaps. But the schools that we have now aren't the schools that we had back then. We had smaller classes. We had more homogenized classes. We have more first-generation Kiwis here that are coming in. And I think they're asking teachers to do more with less for more students and more diverse students without any support. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that, Chewy. The diversity that is now present in New Zealand schools is far greater than we had back in those nostalgia, and let's be honest, rose-tinted days, because don't forget, those days we had a secondary school system, for instance, deliberately designed to fail half the children in our country.
Yeah.
And now
The bell curve, eh? The bell curve.
Yeah, the bell curve.
Yep.
And it was an artificial one that they created. And now we're actually expecting teachers to ensure at least 80% of children pass. So that's a real about face from those days. But again, 80% is just the bell curve still. And anyone who understands stats knows that nothing in human nature escapes the bell curve. All you can do is artificially change the bell curve, such as some countries where they artificially alter their population so that maybe a lot of the lower paid income people in the country, their children don't actually even go into the country. They stay elsewhere and they just bring in that kind of workforce. You start to artificially alter your population. And so it makes you look better than maybe your neighbour who doesn't do that. So that bell curve is, have you ever noticed anyone saying, 1 in 5 this, 1 in 5 that? Well, that's just 80%.
Yeah.
So, we have to stop trying to thrash the teachers to get them to do something that they're not going to be able to beat. But you're quite right, Chewy. It comes back to what is actually happening in the classrooms. And Jodie, in that TV1 News article, she says every other country where they have mandated and driven into this particular area has not had any significant change or increase in the achievement that they're chasing. And that's because they're actually aiming for and going after the wrong things.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Chewy, you actually did a piece on this, so you correct me as well, but there was some announcement that they were going to do away with something like reading recovery, that the government was going to get rid of something to do with some help. Because what I noticed in there was Erica was saying that they want to be able to identify the kids that need a, quote, little bit more help, end quote. If they're, on one hand, getting rid of some of these things that are going to give these kids a little bit more help, once they've been identified through this new system of 1950s schooling, what is the help that's going to be left funded in these schools to actually give them?
And that's a very good question. So, reading recovery is one area that it's been what was an international sensation when New Zealand developed it, and it was found to work, and it worked overseas. But it's been discredited in the last few years, particularly because it was seen as an expensive intervention. So rather than actually look at the fact that we need to find other interventions to support, you discredit the one that you've got. A lot of people are using what they call the science of reading to discredit it, but in actual fact, it's based on the science of reading too, the same science. So there are some really good ideas in what they are now calling structured literacy, but not all those ideas work for every child. And other schools also have alternative methods and programs that they use that use a lot of the same concepts structured literacy does. So again, we've got to start looking at what is the real game changer. And what we are seeing is no real significant difference in what's been put forward, and particularly, Chewy, your point about how many kids were in the classroom and what kind of things were children presenting with in the classroom. Those things are not being taken into account.
Yeah, that actually, you've just led right into the last question I'd already written down. If what you're saying is true, and this is what the teachers are feeling, that this is going to create no change, if you could actually get the government to do what would bring good change, what kind of things would you guys like to see implemented in the school, in the teacher's classroom, that actually would make some kind of change for the positive?
Well, one thing that we do know is that people are saying that they need more time and they need more support. Now, we don't have the workforce necessary to meet the needs of our growing population. We've got a diminishing number of people putting their hands up to train as teachers. So what we do need is a significant response from successive governments, not just one. We need a government plan that has a workforce that is trained, prepared, that gives enough teachers so that the teachers aren't getting stretched further and further because they're not getting enough support in the classrooms. We get enough specialists to get in there and help the teachers who are also carrying quite a diverse, complex number of needs in the classroom. And we have the right opportunities for them to get time to do the work. And I've just been at a conference recently in Singapore, and at least 25 different education jurisdictions all made the same point, that we have had for the last 20 odd years in all these countries heaped the expectation on teachers, but we haven't done anything to equip them with the time and the space they need to meet all those expectations.
Cheryl, you want to add anything else?
Yeah, look, I think I'm seeing this thought echoed a lot in the chat here that we've got scrolling by, and it just seems that teachers have been really consistent in what they need to improve outcomes for students, and that's either more help in the classroom or smaller class sizes.
Exactly.
Why is it that successive governments keep missing this? It seems pretty obvious.
Well, the solution is obvious, but the actual political will to do it doesn't seem to be forthcoming. And so we have government after government doesn't address the needs, and we've had too many governments bring in enforced cuts. We're just seeing it again in education. Education is not a rosebush. It doesn't flourish when you cut it. It will only reduce and be eroded again and again. So it's just when you erode something to a point, it gets to a point where governments start saying it's too hard. And that's where we're at in this country. They are throwing their hands up. They're not getting into the investment that they do need. In Singapore, 20% of their GDP goes into their education system. We aren't even half of that. So we need to actually figure out how as a country, what do we value? Is it the education of our children? Therefore, we must invest in that, not in more tax cuts for landlords and so on. So it's quite clear.
It's interesting you say what do we value, and not this actually leads into another topic we're doing tonight, Mark, when we talk about a podcast from last night talking about the media industry. And the reason it's sparked something in my head is this kind of neoliberal idea of if something costs money or has a financial value to it, that's why it has value. But one of the questions that gets asked in this podcast is we value all sorts of things that don't have a commercial, capital entity to it. And I wonder if what we're seeing in this government is a little bit of that. They put value in the things that have a financial cost to them. And like cultural reports, we'll get rid of those. It doesn't matter. But, they're putting priority and valuing things that they can put a dollar sign in front of rather than maybe necessarily what's best for the individual or the area they're changing, because it may not have a dollar sign in front of it.
Well, yeah, you've got to look at what is happening in most governments, not just our own. They are very much geared towards helping those who already have privilege and wealth. Yeah. And so this doesn't actually go to helping a child who's in a community that has suffered for quite some time with that redistribution of the wealth within those communities to a few. And I mean, this is demonstrable, it's seen, it is measured. So we need to really get the cost effectiveness is thrown out there as an excuse. Is it Kurt Vonnegut that said we may go down in history as the only people who chose not to save ourselves because it wasn't cost effective.
Very good. Hey, look, thanks so much for coming on tonight. And a huge thanks to Lisa for hooking this up for us as well. There's an NZEI conference on over the weekend in Invercargill. Are you attending it?
Yes, I am. Really looking forward to it. Te Kahui Whetū. It's one of our jewels of our conferences in the year. It's for Māori educators and for educators teaching Māori. And
there'll be a couple of no-name brain-dead podcasters down there on Monday afternoon talking on a panel. We've been invited to come down as well, so we're going to come down and look incredibly out of place amongst all you smart people.
Oh, no, I think you'll be well fitting in, guys. Well done.
Hey, all right, Mark, we might see you on Monday, but thank you very much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate the time.
Ka kite.
Cheers, Mark.